Welcome to Whole Mother. This is KPFT Houston, 90.1 FM, Galveston, 89.5 FM, and Huntsville, 91.9. I'm your host, Pat Jones. Whole Mother is a voice in our community which educates and informs us. There are many decisions to be made out there as a parent, mother, father, grandparent, birthing person, aunt, uncle, neighbor. Whole Mother believes that we need to always make our choices out of rational thinking. Choices that are made through education and research, not out of fear, especially fear that is imposed by those who stand to profit by our choices. It is hoped that the education you receive on this show will contribute to changing the way we birth and the way we parent. All humans are born good. I've seen more than 3,000 babies come into the world, and I can tell you that there are no bad babies. There are no bad humans. All babies are born exactly the same in their goodness, their innocence, their curiosity, their brilliance, their ability to love and to trust. They're all born the same, their delight in the world, their happiness. It doesn't matter what country they're born in, what skin color they have, what language they're learning to speak, or how much money is in their family. We are all born with the same goodness. We all come into the world with the same potential. If that's true, that all humans are born without hate, judgment, shame, or jealousy, then where do we learn those qualities if we're not born with them? Whole Mother is here to look at our parenting, which begins in the very first moments, first years, first weeks. It's my belief that we learn about life and we make decisions about life from those very first moments. That those first years, first weeks, those are important to tell our child that their needs will be met, that they're safe, that they're cared for, and that they are good. Remember that KPFT is listener-sponsored, and you are the listeners. That means we bring you information, education that's not funded or sponsored by anyone but you, and we need your help to stay on the air. Pledge drive is over, but we still need you to help us. Go to kpft.org or call 713-526-5738 and donate or pledge. The best is to become a sustainer so that you give a little bit every month, and we know what's coming. I am very excited about our guest tonight. It's a subject that's near and dear to my heart, and I feel passionate about, and I'm so glad that I get this opportunity to share information with you about it. My guest this evening is Georganne Chapin. She's an MPHIL,
MPhil,
and JD.
Mm-hmm.
And a life that has been dedicated to promoting human rights and healthcare equality and quality. Georganne Chapin has become a widely recognized advocate for ending routine circumcision of baby boys in America. We really need to do that. We have enough angry men out there. And I think a lot of it probably started at birth.
And disappointed women.
And yes, that's right. Her recent award-winning book called The Peanuts Business, a social activist memoir. I can't wait to read that. It was just published in 2024. It chronicles the life experiences that led her to lead the inactivist movement in the United States. In 2008, she co-founded and became executive director of Intact America, the largest national organization working to end child genital cutting in the United States and to ensure healthy sexual futures for all people. Prior to that, She founded and currently heads the Hudson Center for Health Equality and Quality. Equity and Quality. Sorry, I said that wrong.
That's okay.
For more than 25 years, she served as the former president and CEO of Hudson Health Plan, which is a large, nationally recognized nonprofit Medicaid managed care organization in the Hudson Valley of New York. In addition to her executive positions, Georganne taught health law and bioethics at Pace University School of Law and bioethics to doctoral level nursing students at Dominican College. Her opinion pieces have appeared in the New York Daily News, HuffPost, the New York Post, and Minneapolis Star Tribune. And she has been interviewed by the New York Times, The Economist, The Guardian, MSNBC, NBC 10 in Philadelphia, and MPSU Radio, AskMen.com, She Knows, First Time Parent, Mel Magazine, and South China Morning Post. She is fluent in Spanish. Georganne has also been interviewed by Telemundo, Univision, and La Voz con Mariel Firio. Did I say that right?
Yep.
Numerous podcasters have featured Georganne on their shows, which include Armchair Experts, Flightless Bird, The Holistic OB-GYN, Chicano Shami, Sex Out Loud, Depths of Motherhood, the Baby Pro Podcast, Curiosity with John and Mike, the Mountaintop Podcast, and Informed Consent, among others. Wow. We are so fortunate to have you. Georganne earned a BA in anthropology from Barnard College and an MPhil in social-medical sciences from Columbia University. While chief executive of Hudson Health Plan, she earned a JD from Pace University School of Law with certificates in health law and international law. A lifelong art collector, Georganne lives near Woodstock in New York's Hudson Valley. She invites listeners to learn more about keeping baby boys intact at intactamerica.org. We are so honored to have you. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, I'm honored to be on the program, Pat. I really am. You've got such a legacy, not only on this topic, but on speaking out about the essential goodness of babies, of people, right?
Yes.
And I think that's so important on this topic because the history of circumcision is in the United States. There's a lot of built-in shame and really punitive philosophy. So it's really important that we go back to who the essential child is and how their children are born innocent and good, and that needs to be respected.
Yes. I hope you don't mind. I'd just like to share my experience with circumcision began back when I was a nurse working in labor and delivery. I was already a midwife, but I was trying to go to midwifery school, so I had to go to become a nurse and work in labor and delivery at that time. And they sent me down to the nursery to do a shift. And they had put a long line, I think there were 7 or 8 baby boys on these, I've forgotten what they call them, but
the circumstraints.
Yes.
The molded plastic board that hold the baby in place with straps, yes. like a prisoner would be immobilized.
Yes, they were spread eagle. And right. the pediatrician came in, and here's this long line, and he just goes from one to the other and does the circumcision on their penis. And, most of them screamed. And I will never get those screams out of my head. Some of them just went silent.
Right.
And so it was such a traumatic experience for me. I knew
for you as a student, right?
Yes, and I knew it was wrong. I knew this was absolutely wrong.
Yeah.
To ever do this to any male.
Right. I've heard many versions of the same story, and each one shocks me because there's a socialization going on there, which is that as a student and a health professional, a nurse or a doctor, you should inure yourself to the misery of the patient. Now, if the patient were recovering from, an automobile accident and was in pain, that's one thing. But to inflict gratuitous pain on a newborn baby and then train people that they should close their eyes to that baby screams, and it precedes it too, because the mothers have been basically coerced or pressured into saying yes. So it's just an abusive practice.
It is. I feel so sad for so many men who had that experience and live with it for the rest of their lives. It's in them. That trauma, I think. Anyway, tell us a little more about Intact America.
Okay, so Intact America was founded by a group of intactivists, which is the term that we use to advocating for keeping baby boys intact, all children intact with the genitals that nature gave them. And we were founded in 2008 by a group of people who had been working against circumcision for a number of years. Many of them are still actively working against circumcision. So Marilyn Milos, who was the founder of No Circ, is now part of Intact America, but she was at the table. John Geisinger from Doctors Opposing Circumcision, Stephen Svoboda from Attorneys for the Rights of the Child, many intactivist organizations, and then a number of individuals, Dan Bollinger, who's on Intact America's board of directors, and others had come together. A private donor had expressed an interest to Maryland in funding a more formal organization. So Marilyn invited me and a number of other people to the table. And indeed, we established Intact America, and I can't believe I've been doing this for 17 years.
Wow.
So we advocate, obviously, to keep baby boys the way nature made them. We advocate against medical practices that are useless. They're medical in that they're carried out by medical professionals, but they're not therapeutic. Infant circumcision treats no illness. It only inflicts pain and removes an essential body part. And there really are a number of reasons that the practice persists, including tradition. It's become a tradition. Right? It wasn't initially an American tradition, but it goes back to the 19th century, to Victorian times, when doctors thought that masturbation and even sex were dangerous and harmful to a person's health. And circumcision started in that era as a way of keeping boys from masturbating. In other words, keeping them from pleasuring themselves. And what's so interesting is, and it didn't work, of course, but it's so interesting that the actual origins of male circumcision were to curb sexuality and curb pleasure. And now you have this myth that it doesn't matter, that circumcision doesn't, you'll every few months, you'll see an article that will say we set out to see whether circumcision harms sexual pleasure, and we've discovered it doesn't. And how could it not? You've removed the most sensitive part of the man's penis, and a part of the man's penis that is designed by nature to work with the female genitals, right, to maximize pleasure and procreation. So Intact America has a really big mission, because we're fighting pseudoscience. We're fighting a culture that generally does not value children and does not respect children. We're fighting a lot of bigotry and ignorance. The foreskin is reviled in our country, and the truth about circumcision, I started referring to the foreskin and circumcision in this country as being banished knowledge. There's a lot of there's a lot of talk about banned books, right? But
Right.
circumcision is banished knowledge, and that's a term that child psychotherapist Alice Miller used beginning in the 1880s. She actually has a book called Banished Knowledge. She's most famous for the book, The Drama of the Gifted Child. And Alice Miller talks about how abusive child rearing practices are, and all undertaken, as you said, for ostensibly for the good of the child. And of course, it's simply not true. It's undertaken for the gratification of adults and for the benefit, really, of the medical profession.
Right. Yeah.
Who charges, to do it. And once it's a practice like that is established, very hard to eradicate.
Right.
So that's our work. And we envision the day when no child will be mutilated for profit or parental preference or aesthetic reasons. Because that's once you start removing the foreskin from every male, that comes to be seen as normal and attractive, and a foreskin is seen as ugly and shameful. So those are our precepts. We go by the basic bioethical principles of autonomy, beneficence, maleficence, non-maleficence, and justice, and circumcision violates all of those. Mm-hmm. And we do campaigns. We used to do more demonstrations than we do now. The pandemic sort of got us off track on that, but we do Pride events. We established Foreskin Day as a national holiday, April 4th, every April 4th. The two books, my book, This Penis Business, a social activist memoir, and another memoir by Marilyn Milos called Please Don't Cut the Baby, a nurse's memoir. Those are Intact America accomplishments. And we have an amazing website, intactamerica.org, and it incorporates some of the materials that used to be in the NOCIRC website. NOCIRC.org is defunct at this point. We also have a campaign called Skin in the Game. I'll mention some more of these later, but we're a very robust organization, tremendous amount of social media, daily posts on Facebook, Instagram, Reddit. We have a YouTube channel, and we have several websites. Mm-hmm. These can all be seen by going to intactamerica.org. That's the main website.
You wrote this award-winning memoir, The Penis Business, a social activist memoir you refer to, and that has a 4.5 star rating on Amazon.
Yeah, and they're not all my friends.
Tell the audience a little more what that memoir is about, and why did you give it such a provocative title?
Well, the title, as you said, is This Penis Business, and the phrase came from a friend of mine, a neighbor, who kind of watched me go from being someone who just mouthed off about how terrible circumcision was to becoming a formal leader in the movement. And she was an anthropologist. And one day we were talking, and I was very enthusiastic because I was going to be able to help to form this organization. And she looked at me and she said, "How did you get into this penis business?" I thought, oh, wow, that's a great title for a book. And I wanted to answer the question. Uh-huh. And I realized over the years, that was, back in the 2000s, she asked me the question. And over the years, I thought about it. I actually wrote a full-length book about circumcision back around 2010, 2011. And it was just boring because those facts were out in the few books about circumcision, the history and why it was bad, and also why it was also bad and how terrible it was. And all of those things were true. But I wanted to put the personal in there, which is what a memoir does. So I grew up in a family my parents were civil rights activists, anti-Vietnam War activists back in the 60s. And I grew up in I grew up in places that ranged from conservative to much more liberal. And it was always in our family, there was always a tremendous amount of focus on human rights and caring for people who couldn't necessarily take care of themselves. And my parents were not activists against circumcision, but a lot of what I heard and witnessed at home really came to play when I started thinking about the act of cutting off part of baby boys' bodies. That awareness came when my younger brother was born. One of my two younger brothers was born when I was 10. And he was brought home from the hospital with a bloody penis, which is the first time I ever saw a wounded penis on a baby or anybody. And I asked about it and was told he'd had a circumcision and really no explanation given what that entailed. And then he had to be taken to the doctor later, and the hole in his penis, the meatus, which is the opening that had closed up, and he was having a hard time urinating. And so they had to reopen it with a scalpel as my mother held him. And of course, when he was circumcised in 1962, no anesthesia ever was used.
Right.
So he had 2 unanesthetized surgeries in the first few weeks of his life. That was, horrifying.
Yes.
And anyway, that was my awareness. So when I started hearing the word, which wasn't much on anyone's radar screen, every time I would flash on that, like, why are we doing this? How can it be that every male is born needing surgical correction? It just didn't make any sense, right? So that's how I became aware. And then, I grew up in the 60s. I graduated from high school in 1969, went to college, and I traveled. I did what a lot of people did in those days. I took off and I traveled, and I lived in Mexico, and then I went to graduate school in anthropology and did field work in Bolivia, and I played South American music, and in my youth, I saw my share of circumcised and intact penises, and noticed a stark difference. And I just was always on my mind. And no, I wasn't an activist at that time. I just people talked about it, I would respond. And then over time, I really started seeing this as a horrifying thing to do to a child. And I began to grasp the damage that was done. When my son was 18, he thanked me. He thanked me and his dad for not having him circumcised. He was born in 1980. And that was an epiphany for me. Despite all of my thinking about it, I don't think I realized until that happened how what you did to a baby, cutting off this part of his body, was going to have a lifelong impact. Right. And that's when I really became active. And that's also coincidentally when I went to law school and started really studying the phenomenon from a legal and human rights perspective. So it's a long-winded way of, and I thought that people would be interested in my story.
Yes.
I read memoirs. I love memoirs.
Yes.
And I had read Cecile Richards' memoir and thought it was fantastic. And she has similar experience growing up in a liberal family in conservative places, Texas. And her mother was the first woman governor of Texas. My mother was a very active professional woman, university administrator, university professor. Both my parents were academicians. And so Cecile Richards' memoir inspired me to write that format. Mm-hmm. And I set out to do it right sort of the beginning of the pandemic, and the book was published in 2024. Mm-hmm. At the same time, Marilyn Milos, who we talked about, was writing her memoir. Mm-hmm. We kind of came to this at the same time without planning it. And both books, hers is called Please Don't Cut the Baby, were funded by Intact America, the cost of publication, right? And we had an independent publisher called Lucid House Publishing, and published both of the books in February 2024.
Wow. And how is there anything more you might want to say about how those books work together?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Marilyn was 10 years ahead of me in age, and she founded the movement against infant circumcision. She had an upbringing. She's from the San Francisco Bay Area, and she, was a hippie in mid 1960s, Haight-Ashbury, and, has a very colorful story and past. She had three sons, all of whom were circumcised before she witnessed a circumcision like you when she was a nursing student, and was brought to her knees by the realization that she had let that happen to her three babies. Subsequently had a daughter, and she really, I think she felt that she was paying penance for the rest of her life for having allowed her sons to be circumcised. But of course, she was told by the doctor it's good for them. They don't feel a thing, and it'll protect them for life. And didn't bother to get specific about what kind of protection that might be. So that was her story, and she's got many very interesting anecdotes about all the people she met along the way. She hosted 16 symposia, international symposia about genital cutting and human rights. And she is now part of Intact America's board of directors and our clinical consultant.
Very
so
cool.
Both books I've the people who have the time to read both books have expressed a tremendous appreciation for both of them.
Would you mind to say the titles of each of them again,
right?
So that our audience can,
sure. Yeah, my book is This Penis Business, a social activist memoir, and published in 2024 by Lucid House Publishing. And Marilyn's book is Please Don't Cut the Baby, a nurse's memoir, also published in 2024 by Lucid House Publishing. And they're both available anywhere books are sold online. Get them from your local bookstore, you get them from your library, and I hope you do. Hope people do.
Yes.
We also have a campaign which has been going for the last couple of years, called Skin in the Game. And that is a photographic and storytelling campaign. And there's about a 50-page booklet. And that's also available on those platforms. And it's a beautiful photographic representation of these. We did photo shoots in Atlanta and Dallas, and the results and the quotations from the people who we took photos of, their quotations about circumcision, whether they're mothers or circumcised men, or are paired with their photographs. And it's a beautiful book.
I would encourage the audience to look at getting these books, not only for themselves, but also because you can pass them on. And
Yes.
You never know when there's going to be an opportunity for you to educate someone.
Right.
And the books are a really wonderful way to be able to give somebody education.
Right. Yeah, and actually the holidays are coming up, and if you know a mom who's concerned about this or questioning circumcision or interested, both books are great gifts. They're also available on Kindle and in audio format. So they're very, very accessible. I actually have a big box of books ready to mail out to a friend of mine who goes around and puts books in people's private libraries.
Oh, nice.
And those curbside libraries that you see.
Yes.
So I'm sending her a few copies of each of the books. So
that's a great idea. Well, I also want to ask you about one of these myths that I heard as a nurse midwife with people when I talked to them about this decision. It would often come up that they wanted to do it because they wanted their son to look like them.
Right.
And would you address that?
Well, I tend to, be a little maybe overly reactive when people say things to me that I think are weird or stupid. I say, like, well, what if your son has different color eyes than you have?
Right.
You're going to give him back. No one's going to see his penis. And certainly your penis and his penis aren't going to look anything alike for at least a couple of decades. Yes. And who's looking?
Right.
And it seems so. What happens is, if you haven't thought it through, and somebody asks you a question like that, why, I want him to, or says that, I want him to look like me, oh, okay, no, no, he's not going to look like you. I mean, your daughter's doesn't have breasts like you have. Right. And what if she has big breasts and you have small breasts? Are you going to do breast reduction on her? Right. So that's a really, but people have bought into it, so they'll say it.
Yeah.
And you can be, I get that significant look, like,
yes,
I want him to look like me,
Right.
So that's one. And then of course there are lots of other myths, and a lot of them have to do with diseases, and they're all wrong.
Right. Right. One of the things I did when the mother and the father disagreed about it,
Mm-hmm.
I saw a lot of conflict in the relationship when a woman would agree to do it even though she didn't want to.
Right.
But she wanted her husband to be happy and didn't want to go against him. But what I saw happening is that it influenced their relationship for years.
Forever.
Forever. That's right.
And even more so now, when so many more young men are asking why, and it's become more common for them to speak out.
Yes.
And who did this to me, and who said it was okay, and you didn't have a right to do this. And then these family stories come out about the conflict. Yes, I talk about that a lot in my book.
Oh, wonderful.
I talk about the calls I get from people. I get them from mothers complaining about the husband wanting the child circumcised, but I also have gotten them from fathers complaining about the mother wanting the child circumcised. So it goes both ways.
Yes.
But some of these stories I hear, I can't help but think, like a man called me, it's been a while, maybe a couple of years, and he said that he was circumcised and he was very unhappy about it. And his wife was adamant that she wanted her son circumcised. And that if he caused her any trouble about that, she wanted a divorce. And they had a 2-year-old child and a daughter. And he said, and I'm just in agony. I don't know what to do. He said, am I going to lose my marriage over this? And am I going to lose my family over this? And I was thinking to myself, your marriage is gone. It wasn't my wish. It was so sad.
Yes.
And I spoke to him 2 or 3 times and I never heard again. I sent him a couple emails and I stopped, and I don't know what happened. But there were many such conversations and calls like that. And it's tragic. It's just tragic.
It is.
We've actually had people, we had a very, very smart, articulate, and lovely man who was a supporter of Intact America and wrote some things for us. And he had a daughter who was 15, and his wife violently opposed him being a supporter of our organization. I mean, I couldn't even imagine why. And he eventually said, I just can't do this anymore. I can't be an activist anymore because it's too stressful for me personally. And, I just think that's so, it shows you how deeply this all runs. The tagline of our Skin in the Game campaign is circumcision cuts through us all.
Oh, I love
because it. And everybody in America has a circumcision story.
Yes.
And I realize that when I go out to speak, the audience reactions and responses, and a lot of the people will say, I never told anybody about this. I never mentioned this before. It's the first time I've talked about it. Women, the first time I did a book talk in a bookstore in Atlanta, a woman in her early 80s who was in the audience spoke up. She was the first person to speak up, and she said, I don't remember if she's 82 or 81, or she said, and and I've never talked to anyone about this. And she proceeded to tell the story about her son being taken away from her after she gave birth, and she was doped up because in those days,
Right. That's how they did it. Right.
and then other people, kind of chimed in. They all have circumcision story.
It's really wonderful to be able to tell those stories. It's
Oh,
so
yeah.
healing for people
Yeah.
to be able to do that.
It is. Although the tragedy remains, right?
Right.
And then we also know that there are circumcision deaths that come from complications of the surgery, because there are a tremendous number of complications which are always played down by the American Academy of Pediatrics. So we estimate about 100 deaths a year, a little bit more in the United States, and none of them are recorded as death from circumcision. They're exsanguination, hemorrhage, cardiac arrest, sepsis, infections. But there are also deaths in adult men, because there are, since I've been in the movement, that I know of, probably close to a dozen suicides.
Wow.
And then I wouldn't have any way of knowing about. Those are things that have come to my attention, right?
Yes.
People who just can't bear the consequences of what happened to them.
This is so deep, and so Intact America has a counseling program now. Would you talk a little about that?
Yeah, we do, and I'm so proud of it. Stephen Patterson is my deputy director at Intact America, and he really put the work together to get this program going, and 3 psychotherapists independently, but all had an interest in circumcision. They had seen clients who were having a lot of psychological problems having to do with their circumcision. And these 3 men who didn't know each other, 2, by the way, were Canadian, and one was an immigrant to the United States from Russia, came to us independently and wanted to help. And so we ended up having them work together. And last year we had our first session or series of sessions. So it's a peer counseling program, but the peer groups are led by licensed psychotherapists. And they're for men looking to unpack the problem of circumcision in their lives. It's open to men who are monthly donors to Intact America in any amount. So you can give $5 a month to, we want people who have an investment in the organization, and who will come to every group session. And other than that requirement, the program's free of charge. Intact America pays the therapists. Wow. And we have monthly sessions of about 2 hours each. And I actually had copied down some notes with some of the feedback from. Can I mention that?
I would like that so much. Yes, I just wish every circumcised man knew about this group. Right. It would be so helpful.
Well, the need is so much greater than anybody can respond to. Of course, our hope is that mainstream therapists will become comfortable with this topic, right?
Yes.
Because many of the men who I've talked to have been shut down by their psychotherapist. So this couldn't possibly be the thing that's bothering you. Got to be something. Come back when you figure out what it really is that's bothering you. As if having a piece of your body cut off when you were a tiny baby is not bothersome. Right. So here are a couple of quotes.
You don't remember it, so.
Right. You don't remember it, which of course is not true. It's laid down in your subconscious forever. Yes. So one of the quotes I wrote down is, I've been aware and conscious of my anger about being circumcised since I was a preteen, but working with this group brought my understanding of all the other aspects of the damage it has caused to a profound and deep level. Another was just saying how useful the therapy was. Participants are graciously supportive of each other and bravely share their stories as a way to heal and to help others process the experience. And the discussion covers topics ranging from pre-verbal emotional trauma to impacts on sexual experience with and without a partner. So those were some of the feedback that
And
we
tell the
got.
audience again how they could get involved in this program.
They can write to info@intactamerica.org. And we do have another group session starting soon, late this fall or early next year, and they will be ongoing. We'll have more, and Stephen Patterson will get those. And you can become, if you become a monthly donor, you'll be ahead of the game. And like I said, it can be in any amount.
Mm-hmm. Very, very valuable. This is how we change the world, I believe.
Yeah.
I can't help but think that every time we see violence instigated by a male, that maybe it has something to do with what happened to him when he was really young.
Well, you talked about conflict between parents over the circumcision decision, but the conflict persists into their own sexual relationship also. Mm-hmm. And as you know, as a woman who grew up in the 60s and my friends were feminists, and I heard so much. I still hear, it makes me cringe to hear women complain about men and men complain about women. I mean, anything more deep than something like, I wish, he washed the dishes better or something, but any really kind of psychological accusations, because, and complaining about sex and connection and lack of connection, I just cannot forget. I can't dismiss that most American men are operating without the most erogenous part of their penis, yes, the foreskin. And it was cut off from them probably without any anesthesia when they were a baby. So for many years, I've heard women complain about, and you read about it, their male partner's lack of sensitivity during sex to their needs, and pounding, pounding them and wishing for more intimacy. There's a song from the 60s called Slow Hand, and by the Pointer Sisters. And every time I listen to it, I want to love her with an easy touch. Someone will take the time and not come and go in a heated rush. And I think about circumcision, because missing the foreskin, you're missing the feedback that precedes the ejaculatory process. And it's not the guy's fault. He's literally missing something very important. Now, there can be other things wrong with relationships, but I believe that male circumcision is responsible for an enormous amount of sexual dysfunction, yes, in couples.
Yes.
So
we know totally
that, we know that, yes, Americans consume lubricant, sexual lubricant, and erectile dysfunction drugs at much higher rates than other countries. And it's hard to get a handle on all that because there's so many things that go into, consumer behavior, but we do know that.
And even though you don't have a conscious memory of it, just having the tactile stimulation of that memory that something happened there and it was really bad.
Right. Marilyn Milos has said it's where pain and sex, first are associated, right? Because babies who are circumcised, the handling of the penis, the baby will have an erection. Even at one, babies have erections in utero.
Right.
So manipulating the penis before a circumcision, the baby will have an erection, and then the clamp and the scalpel and the cutting,
yes,
all, inflict immense pain.
Yes. Well, other than my earlier question about let's do this so that my son looks like me, why does circumcision persist in the United States? We're a very well educated country.
Well, we're not educated about the foreskin,
We
about
are
the penis.
not.
We're not really well educated about sex either. I mean, we
Right.
talk about
That's right.
sex
Yes.
a lot, and we watch, as a country, apparently, we watch pornography at a huge rate. So we are obsessed with sex, but we're not well educated about it. But circumcision persists. It's become an American tradition in medicine. Money, inertia, status quo. And also, I believe that to end circumcision would be to admit that tens of millions of boys and men have been unconscionably mutilated for no legitimate reason.
Yeah, that's right.
As a doctor, I talked to and who told me how many boys had circumcised in his small city in Maine, some outrageous number. But he was asking me all these questions and saying he was open-minded, and he also told me he had not circumcised had his own son circumcised. I don't know if that was true. I don't know if any of this was true, but this was what he was saying. I don't know if he really circumcised 5,000 boys, like he told me. It's a lot of babies.
Yes.
And I said to him, "You're asking me all these questions, and you say you're open-minded, and you didn't circumcise your son. Why do you keep circumcising?"
Yes.
And he said, "Well, the other doctors send their circumcisions to me. They send the boys to me because I do a really good job. I do a better job than they would do." And I said, "So you don't know if it's the right thing to do, but you do it really well." And he said, "Yeah, that's why." And I said, "Well, have you thought about just stopping? Just saying to people, I don't do that anymore." And he looked at me and he said, "Well, stopping, that would be really complicated." And it would be. But somebody's got to stop, right?
That's right.
And the other reason that it continues is that it's sold to people. It's sold. Those fathers have been told that looked like me as a legitimate goal. Mothers are pressured. Intact America does surveys, and we did a survey on solicitation, and we found that the average number of times that women were asked or told, but asked if they wanted to circumcise the baby was 8.4 times in the perinatal period, both before and immediately postpartum. And some were asked as many as 12 or 14 times.
Wow.
And this is, if you look at the internet sites, you hear this by so many people. And, eventually they get worn down. Mothers are the target of the circumcision machine. If you think about it, just as they're the target for baby clothes, infant formula, diapers, these are products all being marketed to women. And circumcision is no different. The baby's certainly not making the decision to be circumcised. And the fathers are ancillary in that process.
Mm-hmm. Well, it feels tragic, doesn't it?
Yes, it is. It is a national tragedy.
Yes.
Because even if we stop, which, I hope and pray every day that people will be seized with common sense, and the medical profession will decide that the ethical arguments are compelling enough to stop. But even if we do, tens of millions of American males are circumcised and will be, and will have that as a liability for the rest of their life. Now, I want to make sure that people who are listening don't think I think that every single man who has had a circumcision is miserable and cannot be a wonderful, sensitive person and partner. I know plenty of wonderful men
yes,
who have great relationships.
Yeah.
But when you think, it's almost like in spite of what happened to them when
That's
they were
right.
babies.
I agree. Does the American Academy of Pediatrics recommend circumcision?
They've gone back and forth over the years. Initially, their first statement said it was not medically necessary and there was no reason to circumcise baby boys. And then pro-circumcision physicians have kind of took control, and they started, coming up with all of these reasons that boys should be circumcised, that it was cleaner and healthier, and circumcised boys were less likely to get urinary tract infections. Now, meanwhile, urinary tract infections can be cured with, $2.10 worth of antibiotics, just like they are in girls. Penile cancer, the American Cancer Society says circumcision is not preventive of penile cancer, which only affects 1 in 100,000 men, by the way, as opposed to breast cancer, which affects 1 in 8 women in the U.S. So the AAP has really been ethically bankrupt on circumcision. Most recently, they had their last report, which is expired now, was in 2012, and they continued with the maxim that the benefits outweigh the risks, but the benefits are not enough benefits outweigh the risks, but the benefits aren't sufficient to recommend circumcision for all boys, which would leave you with the question of, well, which boys?
Which ones?
Right. And then also, they admit elsewhere in that report that the complications of circumcision have never been systematically studied. So I don't know how you can make a benefits outweigh the risks argument like that. More recently, a couple of members of the task force have made a not public statement exactly, but have been quoted as saying that there are not adequate medical justifications for circumcision. However, the American Academy of Pediatrics continues to call for reimbursement by insurance, private insurance, and Medicaid for the procedure. So if, advocating that doctors should continue to get paid to do this utterly useless and damaging surgery on people who cannot consent.
Money
and perpetuation of the status quo, right? Mm-hmm. I really, everybody, will say it's all about money. If it were all about money, it might be easier to stop it, because you could pay doctors not to circumcise, right? You could.
Yes, you could.
You could pay parents and doctors.
Yeah.
$50 not to circumcise their kid.
It might work.
It would be great. Yes. But I've offered, like, pregnant waitresses, say, give them a business card, call me after you have your baby and I'll send you $100 if you don't circumcise them. I've never had anybody take me up on it. I hope they haven't circumcised him and they just didn't pursue the $100, whatever, but I would have sent him $100. But yeah, it's money is a big part of it, as it is in all medicine, but creating the demand and perpetuating the status quo are also part of that.
Closing words for the community. What would you like the community to, what could the community at large do? People that aren't going to have children anymore, or
tell them about the show that you just heard, and tell them about, you just heard that there were these books, Please Don't Cut the Baby, a nurse's memoir, and This Penis Business, a social activist memoir. Tell them, talk about it. I mean, one of the things that, when I said the circumcision is banished knowledge and the foreskin is banished knowledge, people are reluctant to talk about this. Right. Even intactivists, even people who donate to our organization are afraid to talk to their family. Not all, some, afraid to talk to their families about it, afraid to bring it up when they have a friend who is expecting a baby. There's a tremendous amount of fear and shame attached even to the discussion right? So and this is working. I mean, more and more and more and more people are talking about it, and it's no longer. I mean, we produce them, and they're sold online through Zazzle. T-shirts that say 10 out of 10 babies say no to circumcision. Uncut king. All kinds of lucky. Not circumcised ? Lucky stiff. So humor has been, injected into the movement, which is a very healthy thing.
Yes.
And so everybody should talk about this because circumcision affects everybody.
That's right.
And doctors who tell you, if I'm speaking to your audience now, it doesn't hurt and it'll protect. No, of course it hurts.
Yes. Yes.
Of course it hurts. It might not hurt, if you get a shot into 3 shots into the base of the penis before the procedure.
But afterwards,
that boy's going to go home with a wounded penis, and a new mom is going to be doing wound care.
Right.
And so all of this stuff needs to just be matter-of-factly and openly discussed.
Yes.
And people need to say no when they hear BS. They need to call bullshit on some of these myths and think about it. So that's the main thing. And go on our website, go on intactamerica.org, go on some of the other Intactivist websites. Your Whole Baby has great material on Facebook pages. So just educate yourself. And believe me, it's not boring. It's a really interesting topic.
Yes. Thank you so much for what you do in the world. You are changing the world one penis at a time.
Well, I hope so. And yes. I really thank you so much, Pat, for doing this show. I really appreciate it. And I wish I could see the faces of your audience when they listen, but yes. I'm with every single one of you. And if you want to talk to me, you can email me, Chapin, GCHAPIN, at intactamerica.org or info@intactamerica.org. And your questions will get to me. I won't give out my phone number, but it's not that hard to find. I take phone calls, even people in an emergency situation, like a last minute decision. I'll talk to anybody who reaches out to me about this question and this problem. So please educate yourselves, reach out, and thank you so much for.
Thank you so much for what you do. You're changing the world. Thank you.
Well, I think you are too. So
thank you.
Here we are together.
Yes, thanks.
All right.
If you want to contact us, we're always pleased to hear from you. Our address is wholemothershow@gmail.com. If you want to contact me personally, my email is birthcare@me.com. You can listen to this show and years of shows on wholemothershow.com. Thank you to our engineers. Thank you to EJ, to Edward, to Eric for all your support. Thank you out there for listening to Whole Mother. I'm Pat Jones, and this is KPFT Houston.